Everyone, I am Clinton Smith, editor-at-large at New England Home Magazine. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today for Boston Design Week's series of virtual events. I'm sorry we're not able to gather in person, but I think brighter days are ahead and we may be gathering soon, which will be a treat to see everyone and get to reconnect. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm also thrilled to be joined by the amazing talent Christopher Spitzmiller. As most of you know, Chris is a celebrated ceramicist whose beautiful lamps and other decorative designs are coveted the world over for their beautiful shapes, gorgeous colors, and heirloom qualities. And yet, Chris's talents extend well beyond the studio. At his farm in Millbrook, New York, about 2 hours north of New York City, he has created a veritable Garden of Eden with the most amazing flowers, the most amazing fruit trees, vegetables, any kind of chicken you can imagine, geese, bees, doves, dogs, and much, much more. And lucky for all of us, all of that magic has been recently captured in his best-selling new book, A Year at Clovebrook Farm. In fact, the book, which hasn't even been out for 2 months, has been so well received that it actually has gone into a second printing. And today we're going to be talking about all things Clovebrook, as well as the journey of Chris's career and how he ended up there. So Chris, good morning or good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Where are we finding you today?
I'm in the studio in New York today.
Fantastic. And again, congrats on the book. That's very exciting, a second printing already.
Yeah, they sold like 10,000 copies before the first day and they printed 13,000. And so they're scrambling around and saying, no more events until we get the second printing in, no more events. So I'm trying to keep them at bay. And Amazon has some books. I have some books. There's still some out there. It's just for bigger events, we're sort of struggling.
Yeah, I logged on today and I saw all the 5 stars. So that's good too. So like I said, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the farm today, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting to go back and see where it all began with your career and your passion for pottery and design. So Chris, where are we here?
So we're at Peacocks Gardens. This is the summer that I sort of really got everything sort of started. I had I'd had a show of my plates and dishes in Washington, D.C., and it had done really, really well. And Peacocks was opening up that first summer, and Matt Koch said, why don't you come be potter in residence? So I packed up my car into my kiln, and I drove out to the Hamptons, and I made my dishes. And the minute they came out of the kiln, they either broke immediately or soon there afterwards. But I always say, like, as an artist, like, you kind of need failure at the beginning of your career to sort of like inform you to say, yes, I'm going to stick with this. And at Rhode Island School of Design, where I went to school, they sort of told us, if you can do anything else, you probably should. But, you know, I stuck to it. And the silver lining was meeting Richard Keith Langham, who's on the next slide, and he ordered the first pairs of lamps for me. So Keith had been Jackie O's decorator for the last 10 years of her life, and this house happened to be Jackie O's grandparents' house, and he sketched out a pair of lamps, which you see one of them behind the sofa there, and he's like, you're going to make these and they'll be here in 2 weeks. And back then I made just the base for him, and Keith had the bases made and turned and electrified, and he ordered more and more, and business was sort of born out of that.
What was so interesting is that I actually thought you had already started your business and he just bought the first pair. I did not realize he had commissioned them.
He commissioned them.
Yeah, and you mentioned recently how you did that first outreach, how you were mailing things out to designers everywhere, right?
Yeah, I would put together packages of information, of pictures of the lamps in situations or just the lamps, and I would send them out to designers who I admired, and I could basically only afford to like send 10 packets out and make 10 lamps at that time. And, you know, I sent them out to like Albert Hadley and Tom Pheasant and Bill Hodgins and Barbara Berry. And most all the people I sent them to wrote and said, yes, I want some of these lamps. And so this was the very first studio I had in Washington, D.C. on that last slide. And where I started out working from, it was subterranean, just across the street from Montrose Park in Dunbarton Oaks. And I expanded and grew and eventually, you know, took a deep breath and moved up to New York where I am now.
And this is one of your other first lamps, right?
Yeah, this is the first pair of lamps I made for Thomas Pheasant, and it was for the Clinton's lawyers, the Bob Bennett's, and Tom had me over help him install those lamps in there. So, right from the beginning, I was making things for important people. Yet in Washington, D.C., when I told people I was a potter, they looked at me like I farted. They were like, "Oh, bless your heart." Which is the welcoming thing about New York is you tell people you're a potter here, and they're like, "Oh my God, tell me about it." Like bankers at Goldman Sachs who make 10 times more money than I'll ever dream of making in my life are excited about a different career because they know if you're doing this and you're making it in New York that you sort of are the top of your game. And even if you're not, they're excited about hearing about alternative careers, because everybody here's a banker or a lawyer or a doctor, to fall out of that realm is an amazing thing. So
Well, one of the things you often talk about is how you've had amazing mentors along the way, each who've contributed different things to you, some in entrepreneurial spirit, some more about creativity. Can we just talk about some of those important people?
So this is my father, who is an incredible vegetable gardener. He had this big vegetable garden in our backyard that my older half brother and sister referred to as the work fields. I loved it and enjoyed it and loved picking peas and eating them right out of the shell. My father had an incredibly hard work ethic, and he was always doing something. And that's one of the things that I feel like I've inherited from him. I ask the kids around the studio, I go, "What are you going to do this weekend?" And they look at me and they say, "Oh, we're going to relax." And I'm like, I wonder what that's like. So.
No rest for the weary.
No. Mm-mm.
And then here in New York, I know Albert Henley was a dear friend, but also an amazing influence design-wise.
Yeah, Albert was my friend and mentor for a lot of years. And, David Kleinberg said about Albert when he died, for a man who didn't have any kids of his own, he certainly raised an awful lot of us. And I feel lucky to be one of the people that he got behind and pushed along, because he just was he had the best manners, best taste, and was so encouraging of anybody. I don't think you can find anybody in the New York design world or anywhere out there that says anything bad about Albert. And when I have a problem or an issue around the studio or in decorating, I think to myself, how would Albert handle this? And I think about this nearly every day in some capacity. So he really left a big mark on me.
And so many. And these two amazing women.
So my mom is on the right, who is less of a gardener. She's somewhat of a gardener, but she's more of an entertaining sort of Martha Stewart type, and cooks and has big dinner parties. And then Bunny Williams on the other side, who they are both they are a day apart in their birthdays, and I'm trying to think of their sign. I think that it's October 31st, and November, I think, 1st is Bunny's birthday. So what's that sign for that? Nick Olson would know for that one.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Is it Sagittarius? Because I'm December 23rd and I'm Capricorn, and I think Sagittarius is right.
I think it is Sagittarius. So they're birds of a feather flock together. The thing I've learned from Bunny and John, her husband, lots of things, the recipes in my book are from them, but Bunny always sets a buffet table when you go over to her house for dinner, so you can take as much or as little as you want, and you serve yourself. It's one of the tricks that I've learned from her and use always.
Sorry, it skipped one. And then the business took off, right?
Business took off. I moved to Manhattan. I took a deep breath and tightened my belt for a little bit. And this is the studio that I was in for 10 years before the studio that I'm in now. And so I've been in New York for, over 20 years. And I like to say that we make jewelry for your living room. There's a little bit of bling involved where, it's that sort of elevation of a room or a color. And, that's what I'm known for, is picking these like really, really great colors.
They're just the most amazing glazes.
Thank you.
And they've also had many fans over the years, including Mario Botta.
Yeah, this is Mario Botta, who is a big, big client of mine. And this is Hillary and Wilbur Ross's guest house in Palm Beach. So if you're lucky, you can stay with them down there. And I got to see this recently. And they had replaced all of the windows on the main house and stayed over there. And there's 2 bedrooms that mirror each other. And I said, Hillary, which bedroom did you stay in? She's like, oh, the one with the Chinese wallpaper, definitely. Can't say I blame her. That's a really, really, really good room.
Did Mario have a lamp named after him?
Mario has a visual comfort lamp named after him, which is sort of ironic because he was really sort of dead set against me doing the visual comfort partnership. He's like, you're going to ruin your name. You're going to do this. It's going to be the end of creation. And it hasn't been, and it is more availability, and I'm thrilled with doing it. So it's sort of ironic.
Yeah, and I think both of those lines complement each other. You're more bespoke and the circle line. I think they go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about this stint.
So I moved to Washington, D.C. right after I graduated from college in 1994, and I was looking around for a job, but nothing was materializing. And so my roommate at the time was friends with the intern director at the White House, and she was over at dinner at our apartment one night, and I was like, beside myself that I couldn't find anything to do. And she said, well, why don't you come be an intern? Why don't you, work? And she's like, I've got openings in the social office and one in the press office. And she's like, I'd take the one in the social office if I was you. And so I filled out all my paperwork and I became an intern. I was actually there at the same time Monica Lewinsky was there. And there's me in my very sort of fashion forward Nicole Miller tie at the time. And it was a great start. I had no idea at that moment that I would then make lamps for the Clintons' houses in Chappaqua and in Washington, D.C., and then for the George Bushes in the upstairs of the White House, and then for Michael Smith or for the Obamas when Michael Smith was elected or named the White House decorator. I wrote him right away and said, I want to donate some lamps. And Michael said, yes, I want to have a room that's all American made. And it was a very proud moment. Claire Potter said about this moment, honey, you should retire because it's not going to get any bigger than this. So.
And just what a full circle moment for you, starting out as an intern and then having these lamps in, such an important place of history.
It really was. And, through the years that the building is in sort of bad shape, and they've been working on it right before Trump got in there. They put bulletproof windows in, and during the Obama administration, the lamps got dripped on from the ceiling 3 or 4 times. And the White House called and offered to send them back to have the gilding touched up. And I know how well that house works and the level of craftsmen they have around there. And I'm like, they can handle that down there. But if you want me to fix it, I'm happy to fix that, but I trust them. So.
And this was from the private quarters, I believe, right?
Yeah, this is the family living room, which is sort of echoes back to the sister parish iteration of the same room. A lot of the same sofa designs are in there from those days. And but Michael did a good job of bringing it forward and making it about today with keeping a good reference to the past there.
And then moving on to Clovebrook. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the talk, but there is a Q&A button where you can submit questions, and people have been asking, and I will get to those before the talk is over. And thanks to many of you who submitted some really amazing questions when you registered. So we'll get to those shortly. Chris, we're in your beautiful dining room.
Yeah, this is sort of an average dinner on like a Saturday night or something. It's my Marbleware plates that we do in blue and white and brown and purple and all the different colors. And we put a little bit of it's harkening back to the days of early American mochaware and slipware that was also made in Europe. And I wanted to do a more modern version of it. So we put a coat of white underglaze on, move it around and let it dry a little bit, and then splatter the color on and then move it further. So there's a good amount of negative space still on the plate, and then we let it dry and put 2 and 3 coats of clear glaze on, and we use them. And they're for every day and for special occasions. I want my things to be used and not put away in a drawer someplace or a cabinet. Keep them out and use them.
Well, one of the things I love about this tabletop is that, it's just this little twist on blue and white. Classic blue and white can often be so overdone, but just with this cloth that you use, which is so unexpected, which is very graphic and linear, than the swirl of the plates. It's just like a nice twist on something that's familiar.
Yeah, and then I always put those bugs out. Those bugs came from John Darien's store. They're actually Christmas ornaments that I have never used as Christmas ornaments. And I've got sets of frogs, and I've got some ladybugs and some of this and that and the other. I think it's nice to have a little something that people can play with and add a different accent other than sort of the standard flowers that you see in the middle there.
And then I've had the good fortune to visit Clovebrook several times and over the years, but I had never seen until this presentation the before photographs. I don't know why you don't have these like hanging up in the hallway somewhere.
Nick Olson says we should have an Instagram account of the real Clovebrook farm, and you know what's going on there. So this is the real Clovebrook farm in October of 2005 when I first saw the house, and I fell in love with it. There was another house that I fell in love with online that was too densely located where it was, and I'm like, I want a house in the middle of nowhere. And so the realtor took me to this one, which hadn't been put on the market yet and was literally like falling down. And you can see I make reference a lot to the Wyethness in it, and you could see Christina crawling up in this picture, and there were honeybees living in the walls of the house and bats in it, and it didn't look like people were living in there, but people were living in there. And you know, it was a woman who had a lot of kids and a lot of horses, and the money went to her kids and her horses, and the house was neglected, and it left me with a blank slate that I could do with what I wanted to, and you know, at the same time honor it historically and try and do as much as I can to bring it back to the way that it was. And so this is when Architectural Digest came and photographed the house. And so after the majority of the work had been done, a friend of mine in Virginia had bought a major house, much more major than I had bought. And his wife said to him, you need to get the house taken care of before you do any of the garden parts. So I sort of did that same process, and I kept myself on the inside of the house. I had a few garden spaces, but mostly I worked really hard. And there was this shack of a garage in this picture, and the AD people were like, but you that shack over there, what do we do? And I go, you crop that out of the picture. You'll have a perfectly good picture if you crop it out. You just have that part in there. So
and then another. Is this the original entrance or the side?
Yeah, this is the main front door of the house, which is not really accessible to anything. And the windows were just big sheets of glass. And thankfully, the far side of the house had the 6/6 original ones in it. And that we reproduced those and took those brick stairs away and put the porticos back on it. And it took me a long time to put the shutters on the house because of that nice little Greek, they call that a dog ear molding on it, which are covered up. You can see in the photos. So this is how the house looks now. It's a little better, not much, but a little.
Just a little. And what I think is so interesting, maybe visitors had the same thought I did, that, oh, it's always been in this shape. And then, like I said, just that transformation is so unbelievable. But can you talk about, you know, so many people buy a house, remodel, move in, and it's done, but this was a real process for you.
It was a real process. It was what I could afford to buy at the time. And I knew that it would have, you know, everybody who sees it now is it's a real house. It's a grown-up house, but it's 3,000 square feet of space, and it looks much grander from the outside than it is on the inside. On the inside, the living room and library are 15 by 15, and my dining room is like, I don't know, like 11 feet by 19 feet, you know, and there's bedrooms upstairs of the same 15 by 15. So it's really quite intimate, and it all sort of loops around, and it disciplined me to not spend my money on things that were not necessary and to keep myself sort of focused. And I painted the outside of it, and I had the windows made, and I put the fireplaces in, and then I reconfigured out the spaces. And this is over 6 years of time. This isn't any like right away kind of things. It was in the recession was right in the middle, and I had to stop working on it because of that. But I picked up and finished the kitchen and did the third floor and did the outside. So this is the kitchen. So this is the oldest part of the house. That's from the late 1700s, and there were like 12 layers of linoleum in there, and it was cold and drafty, and that sink was right in the middle of that fireplace. But I cooked from that kitchen. I made Thanksgiving dinners in there. I had people over and entertained. The kitchen was one of the very last parts of the house that I did. So
And ta-da.
Yeah, this is what it is. So we that's the buffet table that we serve from when we have people over. It flips and telescopes out. That was a table that I bought from Bunny Mellon's estate, and that's me making some rhubarb pies, which the recipe is in the book for the rhubarb pies.
And I'm just going to go back for 1 second so people can take this in for a minute.
See, it's all the same. Like the stove is basically in the same place. We covered over all of those bricks with some wood paneling. We had new windows made. You know, having that table in the center of the room is great. And later you'll see it. There's like a floor plan. There's a pantry off of this room where we store most of the dishes. I wanted the room to feel like a room, and so I wasn't allowed to have any overhead cabinets in there. So I have that one stack of Dodi Thayer dishes there, and store things underneath my refrigerators right in the corner.
And I think it just goes to show, you know, you use every room of that house, and I've never been there when there hasn't been a fire going in that fireplace. I mean, it's used all the time.
So the farm was a dairy farm originally, and then it had been a horse farm. And so there is all these big open spaces of grass that were there. So I had pretty much a blank canvas. And this is the scene for the first garden that I put in, the Dovecote garden, and the porch is there. And you see the next slide, the garden coming in. So I chose European hornbeam to go around the back of it, and the shape is sort of echoed by the driveway and how it comes in, and the stakes in the back there are where eventually the Dovecote landed, and the boards that we used to delineate the grass and the garden beds were old oak boards that were taken from the horse stalls in that cow barn back there. This is a little further progression. The big pile of manure is bought from a local cow farmer, and I love to, you know, enrich the soil and make it as best as it can, because that's better than any fertilizer you can get your hands on. And so we compost the chicken manure and spread that around, and compost all of our other scraps and stuff from the farm. But those hornbeams are very, very small in there, and you can see in the next slide how much bigger they've gotten.
Hold on, it's loading. And then comes springtime.
Yeah, then comes springtime. And so we plant over 2,000 tulip bulbs that flower in sequence, and there's some fritillaria in there. And before the tulips have even started blooming, I plant sweet peas along the fence, and the fence grows up with sweet peas in June and early July, and then after that, when they burn out, we rip them off, and there's dahlias planted along next to them, and at the end of the summer they're all covered with dahlias. So what I'm interested in is a sequence of bloom and timing them all so that there's never an empty spot or a dull moment in there.
And I know from the book that you change out your color combination of tulips every year. What did you do this year?
There's more red and there's some more white in there, but there's black is always a popular color, and orange is always a theme, and God knows I always do purple. I tend to like these darker colors a little bit better. I did a year of all sort of pastel-y colors, and I don't know, I didn't find it as impactful as these sort of stained glass colors.
And soon after the tulips come the peonies and the hydrangeas, which are just unbelievable.
Yeah. So those are all grown at the farm, and in there with the peonies is Viburnum Newport and some, what is that, lilac? It's Japanese lilac, just the later blooming one, which you need to grow regular lilacs and the Japanese one, because the Japanese one comes about a week or two after your regular lilacs have bloomed, and the smell is incredible on them. There's one variety called Miss Kim that I like a lot. Here's a cross section of all of the peony, or some of the peonies I grow. I have about 450 peony bushes, and I buy at least 6 of each of them. And I grow one called Early Bird, which will bloom first, and then the tree peonies, which are in the upper corner, are the second ones, and then Itoa and the herbaceous ones, which are all in here. This photo is nice because it highlights the single blossoming peonies, where we're used to the double ones, which is the one down in the corner, which is Festiva maxima, and there's a pink one that's another favorite that's not in this picture called Sandra Bernhard. But in the book, there are the names of every single one of these peonies and some of the sources that they come from. One of the sources, called Clem Song Sparrow, sadly is not in existence, but there are some other ones in the books that came. They were a COVID tragedy to have them go away.
When will you get the first peony blooms?
The first peony bloom comes around May 10th to the 15th, and there's one peony called Early Bird, and Early Bird is the first one, and it's a single red peony that comes and heralds the rest of them coming short.
So in the next week or two.
Yeah, the buds have taken on color, and they're about to go any day now.
So one of the things about the book, which of course again is called A Year at Clove Brook Farm, you know, it's interesting to think about the amount of time that went into this book. And I know it was working on this for you was more than a year to get the photography. Can you tell people how that process worked and how long it actually took to put it together, to capture the 1 year?
Well, it's 15 years altogether that I've been there. And so like what you've just seen in the garden is like 1 year plus then some other ones. This is the end of the summer of that. Photographing the book took 3 years, 2 really intense years of photographing it. Because, you know, lining it up of when things are going to be in flower and how it all works is tough. But I think we captured it all pretty well. So this is the end of the season. This is dahlia moment where those dahlias get to be, you know, 7 to 8 feet tall, and the dovecote guarded by a fox that Alex Papagrasides had given me. Oh, and there's
And can you tell, I know we cover a lot of about the doves in the book, but this is actually the first time I think people see the dovecote.
Yeah, so that's without the dovecote, and then with the building in there, and you can see it sort of like looks like it was always been there, and it was in my design and not in my pocketbook to do it all at the same time. So we, you know, put the foundation in, and I built a garage, and when we got done building the garage, we built the dovecote, and the dovecote got done. And there had been a show of pigeons at the Rhinebeck Antique Show every year, that they had pigeons that looked like owls and Russian tumblers and this and that, and it was canceled that year. And so it was sort of the beginning of Martha and I's friendship, of me reaching out to her and saying, I know you probably know somebody who can sell me some pigeons. And she gave me one source, and the one source didn't work out, and the second one really did pan out. And here's Martha and I. Every year we make the trek to the Congressional National Poultry Show in Hartford, Connecticut, and fight over who's going to buy the best of these birds. And people often ask, why are we such good friends? And I'm like, well, it's pretty obvious to me. We've like chickens, we like gardening, we've got a lot of friends in common. It's just sort of been a nice meeting of the minds. And she's been incredibly encouraging of me, and I've really appreciated that.
Well, she wrote the most lovely foreword too, which was nice, to the book. Prep time for the show.
Yeah, I like to show my birds at the Dutchess County Fair. I haven't gotten quite in the line of showing at the Congressional Poultry Show, but the Dutchess County Show is in August. And there's a movie called The Chicken People Movie. And if you haven't seen it, I urge everybody to see it. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's like Best in Show, and it's but it's real people instead of fictional people. And it's all about the chicken showing circuit and all the different things and getting your chickens ready to show. And the bird in the beginning doesn't like it, but once it gets under that warm water, it sort of realizes, okay, I don't have any choice, and it relaxes. And we wash them about 2 weeks before the show, and then they go off, and hopefully we'll win.
And you've brought home a few ribbons over the years, I hear.
Yeah, I've won best hydrangea in show for the last, I don't know, like 6 years, but the chicken one, I won the first year I was showing, and I haven't won since.
Um, Tell us about the ostriches. I mean, the peacocks.
Yeah, so this Peacock Anthony is the blue one in the front, which is an India blue peacock. And then the one in the background is called Harry, after Harry Heisman, my friend and decorator. He's a Buford bronze peacock, which is sort of blacky, greeny sort of colored. And it's just about getting to be breeding season. So we'll start getting some eggs from them soon.
Weren't these some of the most recent additions to the farm, or have you had
Yeah,
them?
they're fairly recent. I think that they have been there for, maybe this is their third year that they've been around for. So they are a spawn off of Martha as well. She's got about 20 peacocks at her house, and the man who sold her the peacocks lives right down the road from me. So it's really handy whenever I have some issue with them. I call PETA and get him to come down, and he's very, very helpful.
And also one of the latest additions to the farm is the beautiful pool and pool house you built. Can you share with us some of the inspiration that went into that?
So Albert gave me a bunch of scrapbooks and sketchbooks when he died, and that top picture was in it. And if you read the text around it, it doesn't say where that pool is. It just is some like lovely oval swimming pool and set into some ground. And through Instagram, I figured out that the pool existed at Ladue Gardens in Maryland, where I was last weekend signing books. And Ladue is a topiary garden primarily, but Harvey Ladue built this sort of sunken pool, and he has a Chinese proverb sketched into some stones there, inscripted in there. And it says, if you want to be happy for a week, take a wife. If you want to be happy for a month, you kill a pig. If you want to be happy for your life, you build a garden. So it's a really nice saying.
And this is showing the structure of the pool and the layout of that area.
Yeah, so with every project that I took on at the house, I worked with my friend Jonathan Parison to create architectural plans and drawings of what we were going to do. This was the first one that sort of included a garden in it as well. And this is one of my, well, that's the pool getting made. And the nice thing that you see in this picture is the garage and the pool house, I mean, the dovecote, and then eventually the pool house. And each of those buildings I bought old windows for, sometimes good windows, sometimes just average windows. And with the pool house, I bought the columns on eBay for it. So I find that using older parts for buildings soften them greatly and make them feel like they weren't just built yesterday, because I want it to all look like it's somehow been here forever and sort of coexisted like this.
And one of the things that I thought was so smart where you cited it, which I think was what, like a former writing area?
Yeah, that was the riding area. So it was perfectly flat up there. Soil's not so great, so we've been doing a lot of soil amending to get that better, but it's nice because it's away from the house. The big choice in building a pool always is, do you locate it close to your house or do you locate it far away? And I like the idea of it being far away because A, it's a destination of, you go up there and you do something different when you're up there, and then B, I don't have to look at it all winter. You know, it's away, and it's got hornbeam planted around it now too, so you don't really see what's going on in there.
I think that's so smart. So you don't have to look at that blue tarp for 6 months. And so your inspiration for the actual pool house, tell us about this.
It came from different places, but the most heavy inspiration is the Bannermans in England, who are a husband and wife team who do these horn-clad folly buildings, and they've done them at Houghton Hall, they've done them at Highgrove, and then this one is at Arundel Castle, which is down in Sussex, and they've gathered old shed antlers and fastened them to the building. They've just sort of screwed them in there. And I found this image on Paige Dickey's Instagram, or an image of the building. And I'm like, my God, that's what I need to do. Because I wanted something sort of similar to what Bunny Williams had done, but I wanted to do it different from Bunny. So the horns were a great solution, and the Bannermans follow me on Instagram and cheer me along as I did this. So it's one part Temple of Pan, which is at Osterley Park, one part the Bannermans and one part Bunny Williams, and then the other part me. And there's a little sort of kitchen bar and a bathroom and a outdoor shower off the back and laundry machines, and hours just pass by even easily. Everybody just relaxes when we're by that pool. I sometimes have a hard time sitting still and can be caught weeding in the garden or pulling things out because I'm not very good at just sitting. But
I thought it was very clever too to include a separate washer and dryer since it's so far away.
yes, because it's so far from the house. One of my friends who had a pool goes, put a washer and dryer in as close to it as you can. And I thought we had room enough to put it inside, and we didn't. And we had to build it sort of a hutch out behind it, which is actually sort of better because you never hear the washing machine and dryer because they're out back behind it. So.
And then it's not only your guests and people who like the pool.
Yeah. So with the beginning of COVID, Martha gave me 8 geese eggs, and I never was particularly fond of geese. They hiss and they make a mess, and they're not so friendly. And I hatched these geese eggs and thought I would give them to one of my farmer friends in the neighborhood. And every morning I would hold them, and every evening I would hold them. And then it became time to take them outside. And when I took them outside, they followed me around like a little dog would follow you around. And we have Goose Joan Rivers on the right-hand side of this picture, who is named that because of her eye, has a little bit of bad eye work, and Goose Pat Ulshel on the other side, who's a friend of mine. And Joan Rivers has turned out to be a male goose, which is sort of fitting. So it's a drag queen name. And Pat has produced eggs with Caroline Rome, and they're set to hatch on Friday. We've had some of their offspring that we hatched in an incubator, but they swim in the pool and they're good guests up there.
And this, of course, is a view down to the house, and then you've created this separate garden, which is filled with daylilies and.
Yeah, so what I'm interested in is sequential planting. So where all those lilies are where all of my peonies are. And so there's just all peonies in there. And in the early spring, there's a layer of camassia that blooms first. And then we cut it all back. And then the Russian sage, which you see in this picture, blooms. And the lilies are good bed mates with peonies, I've learned from Paige Dickey, because lilies like hot tops and cool bottoms. So the peony leaves shade the things. And then I plant a few castor bean and sunflower seeds in there as well too. That year I planted my tomatoes in there. My friend Memory Lewis was aghast that I planted tomatoes in such a quote unquote fancy garden. We now have a vegetable garden since Anthony, my partners in my life, and the peonies are down there, and Memory can finally get a good night's sleep now. So.
And then back to the early days, starting on the inside renovation, which was no small feat.
Yeah, so I had never imagined I would go this far. My contractor knew how far I was going to go with it, and he encouraged me to re-insulate the house, which was not on my sort of schedule of things to do. So he took all of the walls out of the house, and we did spray insulation on the outer walls and the fiberglass insulation on the inner walls. And I freaked out big time when this happened, and I came to visit the house, and I called Claire and I was like, what have I done? You know, it was a house before and now it's a shell. And she looked at me, or she said to me on the telephone, she's like, honey, when all of those workmen, which will run late, and all of the bills which will pile up are paid, you won't remember any of it. And it's like giving birth, and you will just have this thing that you remember. And I had dinner with Claire last night with Memory and some other friends, and Claire thanked me for mentioning her book, and she's like, it's good that you wrote that, because I don't even remember that I said that to you, and I can now say that to other people and comfort them, and it's a good lesson.
Then here just showing the great reconfiguration of many of the rooms.
Yeah, so on the right is the before picture, and there is a small book room at the end of the dining room, and the dining room sort of just dumped out from the kitchen, and the bathroom was accessed from the library, and there were no walls in the library to anchor any major pieces of furniture. So we moved the powder room into that space underneath the stairs and made a pantry, and got rid of that book room and made some windows and doors from it. And so it all sort of has that nice flow that it had back then, where you can loop all the way around it, but there's more thought and into the way it is now.
Mix of a few of your favorite themes.
Yeah, that same room from the downstairs version that you saw in the upstairs after it's all been done. The house had all that nice thick Greek Revival molding all the way through it, and each room has a different vocabulary of moldings in it, which is what sold me on the house when I looked at it that day. Even though it was in such bad state of disrepair, I thought, wow, the ceiling heights and the molding, that was the thing that sold me on it. So this is the third floor in renovation. So the third floor was one long room that was all painted sort of like Pepto-Bismol bubblegum pink, and had industrial carpeting and no heat, and had like friends' phone numbers written on the walls from the kids that had grown up in there. And my neighbor had encouraged me to run pipes up there so that when I was doing the third floor, I could put a bathroom in, which I hadn't planned on doing, but I was so thankful when it got time to do it that the pipes were there, and we just connected them and put a bathroom in and did that room that ends up to be the firecracker room. And then there's another room and a bathroom in between it. So this is
so fun.
Yeah, it is. It's Albert Hadley's firecracker wallpaper on the walls there, and sheets from my friend Jane Scott, Leontine linens, and a bed that actually came out of Albert's house. Oh. And then this is an interior before and after. So this is about the time that AD took the pictures of the house, and those are my ancestors on the wall. And then Mario Botta passed away, and I purchased a bunch of spaniels from him, and I say it's my family on one side and Fanny's family on the other side. Fanny's my Cavalier King Charles on my lap, and I go, clearly she comes from a far grander lineage of people than I do. So, and this is the before dining room picture, light fixture that, and then so this wallpaper came into my life. My mom had a friend whose mother had a house that Ellen Biddle Shipman did the garden for, and some of the interior in 1930s. And in the 1980s, when the house was sold, the wallpaper was stripped off of the walls and given back to the original owners. And it sat in their basement for some 20 years without a home. And my mom kept having these discussions with antique dealers trying to find a home for it, and nobody was interested. And I didn't really want the paper myself. I wanted the conversation to end. And said, Mom, send me a piece of it, because I know pretty much every decorator there is. And the piece with the birds came to me, those blue birds, and I was like, I need this for my life. So we made the molding on the top of the room just that much smaller, and it fell into my lap at just the right time. And I got to visit Chatsworth, and when you're at Chatsworth, you'll see the same birds are on the walls at Chatsworth as there is. So it's said to have come from a Russian palace originally, and I think they're right. And this is at least the third house that it's landed in.
Great. We're going to move back outside, and we just have a few more slides, and then we're going to get to your questions.
So this is a garden in winter. I did European hornbeam that holds on to its leaves all winter long. And you can see a little bit of our Christmas dress. I every year think I'm going to do less for Christmas, and I'm never successful. So we get literally hundreds of yards of garland, and we twirl the garland with lights and light it all up. And that's what it looks like going into Christmas.
So not everything is always picture perfect, right?
No, the roof on our barn has caved in. It was an old dairy barn that was built in 1950, and John Roselli, who loves barns, came for a tour through there, and he looked at me and he goes, "Your barn, it has no charm." And so I've been struggling with what to do with it for a long time, for nearly the 15 years that I've been there. And I would have the roofs patched in the beginning of it. Finally, it was $3,000 and $4,000 every time I sent somebody up there. And I was like, it's just like throwing the money out on the highway. And I stopped doing it. And I had some dream of an old barn. And then it came to be that we are going to keep what's there, and we are going to clad over the cement and use the rafters that are there and make one big double high space in the center of it that'll be the showpiece. And then to the right, it will be what's called the chicken wing, where my chickens will live. And to the right will be where we'll store things in the winter. And then eventually there'll be a greenhouse attached to the storage part of it. So I'm buying old carriage house doors. I've got the Gothic windows, came from a cool dealer up in Maine already. So I'm scavenging, and the plans are with an architectural engineer right now, getting all so we can get going on it.
And then if anybody's in your neck of the woods in Millbrook, there's an exciting new shop.
Yes, my partner Anthony Belomo has opened the store Orangerie, and he's trying to sell more unusual things that you get at more from like the 28th Street floral market. He saw me dragging Australian tree ferns and tropicals and branches all the way up there. And, you know, he, being a landscape architect, does garden design up there, but he now also sells and has become a merchant. And he sells my things as well as cheaper things. The one thing that we really like about the store is there's something in there that everybody can buy. So this is the greenhouse part of it. So there's some palms that a friend of ours brought up from Atlanta that make a nice canopy over it. And there's ever changing. We had some great primula, and there's always topiary and perennials and more of the unusual thing. We don't have a lot of everything, but we're trying to have the sort of best of what we can have.
And what are the hours?
Every day from 10 to 6. Right now, as it gets to be winter, and we may shorten the day thing, but now that it's spring, we're seeing people coming every day, and it's a really fun venture for us both to have.
Well, I can't wait to visit. So we're going to end on this gorgeous shot, which really shows how everything is sided and the property is laid out. And we're going to get to some questions, and we have a great mix of entertaining questions, gardening questions, and some decorating questions. Do you have a favorite and easy appetizer for outdoor dining?
You know, one of the things that I really like, there's a place in Saratoga called the Hand Melon Farm, and they send out and grow the best cantaloupes that you can get. And in the summer, in August, when they're available, I like to do like a slice of prosciutto around the cantaloupe and serve that. That's an easy one. I have a caviar dip that we do during the holidays. That's another favorite one. So it's more sort of seasonally what is available that I look at, and what's, you know, like appropriate for the occasion. So,
and in the same vein, any interesting or signature cocktails, mocktails, spirits, drinks that you like to?
There's a couple of tea recipes in the book that I'm constantly drinking, a green tea and a brown tea that I make pictures of, and they sit there all day. I was just down in Baltimore, and they had South Sides down there, which I hadn't had in a lot of year, which is mint, lime, and lemon sort of all infused, and you can mix that with vodka or gin and a little bit of sparkling water, or have it just as a mocktail, which is what I do. You know, there's lots of things. Anthony is always drinking white wine. That's sort of his thing, and he's more of our bartender around the house, so you have to ask him when you see him if you want some better bar recipes.
And then outdoors, when you're, you know, having outdoor dining or a get together in the garden, what about insects, avoiding insects, which can be a real buzzkill?
We thankfully, weirdly, don't have very many bugs up there, and I don't know what it is. And I think I'll probably jinx myself saying that, and we'll have the buggiest year on record. But we have a little bit of like bug spray that I'll like put on my legs, and especially if we're eating dinner outside in the evening, I'll like pass it around or put it out at cocktail hour. And sometimes there's a little bit of mosquito action around their legs, but pretty much we're pretty okay there. We don't have any screened in areas, and the pool house is sort of all open. And there's the occasional bug because it's the country, just as the same as we have the occasional mouse in the house up there too. It's sort of unavoidable.
And along the same lines, do you have, with the garden, do you have issues with deer?
The major gardens are all fenced. The Dovecote garden, the pool garden, and Anthony's vegetable garden. What we have done is we've created other areas of gardens that are more open, and we try and plant things like hellebores, iris, and things that are more deer resistant. But some of the things that are even deer resistant, like crocus, get eaten, so you just never know. So we have areas that they can't get into. My property line goes right through the middle of my pond, so it doesn't make sense to put a deer fence in, and I don't really want to deal with, gates and all that kind of thing more than that. So thankfully, the deer mostly leave us alone. We do deer spray in the early spring on the tulips and tender stuff, but then as it gets to be like it is in this picture, they tend to leave us alone, thankfully.
Couple of questions about bulbs. Do you store your dahlia tubers over the winter? And another question, I keep my bulbs in the ground year round. Why do you recommend removing and replanting them? I'm not sure which type of bulbs in that instance, but maybe you can kind of speak to both of those.
So the dahlias, we do two different things. We take them out in the dovecot garden where there's not 100 of them. In the pool garden where there's several hundred, we erect a small hoop house over the dahlia tubers and we leave them in the ground. And it seems that it's gone well this year. The first year we did it was the year going into COVID and it worked well, but it wasn't very cold of a winter. This winter was more of a real winter. So if it works this year, I'll have more confidence in it. But I've dug down in the ground and the tubers are in there and they feel warm and not warm, but they feel firm and everything. And I plant my tubers way ahead of when they recommend them. I plant them in sort of the middle of April. We replace all of our tulip bulbs, all of the rest of the bulbs, the narcissus, even fritillaria and everything else all stay in the ground and they pretty much multiply. And you can leave your tulips in the ground. All the real gardeners that I know of my friends have this theory that the first bloom of the tulip is the best bloom of it. And tulips are not, well, all bulbs are not really very expensive. The expense lays in the maintenance of having to dig them up and put them in the ground and to take them out. And I get charged with the task of taking them out. We have help, thankfully, that help us plant some of them. So, you know, most of the bulbs stay in the ground, but the tulips we change out.
Someone is asking what crops are farmed, and I know you have the amazing orchard of apple trees, but the one thing that's not in the book, which is a new addition, is your vegetable garden. And I know you give some sneak peeks about the progress of that on Instagram. What are you doing there this year?
So we grow all sorts of tomatoes, cucumbers, squashes, peas. There's a whole bed of onions. There's a whole bed of asparagus. There's peppers. There's cardoons. Right now, we've got some tulips coming up in there, and the rhubarb is coming up out of the ground, and we've started the direct sow seed things in the ground. So we do a lot of that. Like my sweet peas are all direct sown. I believe in that method. I like the method of starting the dahlias in the soil that they're going to be grown in, because there's something about the interruption of growing of when you take something out of a pot and you put it in the ground, it takes a little time to have it grow on. So, you know, I recommend doing what works for you the best, but this method of direct sowing has worked out really, really well for me.
A design question. Do you happen off the top of your head know the color of the exterior of your house?
Yes, it's Benjamin Moore white. It's out of the can, just the standard white. It's not one of the Gil Schaefer likes China white and bone white, but mine is just basic white. And then the shutters are a color called Hell Navy, and the pool house is a color called Midnight. Yeah.
Two furniture questions, not terribly related, but I'm going to lump them together. You're a collector. Do you see antiques making a comeback? I know you buy at auction. And what outdoor furniture holds up the best and still looks beautiful? And I know you store yours, so could you speak to that?
So yes, at auction, things are going for really high prices. I'm sort of astounded at the amounts that things are going for. So I think definitely antiques are coming back. It's sad that we've lost some of the really great dealers, with John Roselli's antique store going away and Niles Smith, which has got a sale at Stair right now. But there's still, you know, Kate Brodsky at KRB has a good mix of old and new. And I think that that's the secret of, you know, you don't want to have a house that's all antiques where it's like a period piece. You want to integrate things. My apartment, if anybody's seen that on here, it looks like an octogenarian lives there. It's, you know, old sort of like Colfax and Fowler kind of a period. And so when I did the house, I sort of set out to make it more fresh and more vibrant and use more painted furniture and more sort of fun things in it. So I know that was the antique question. What was the other? There was one other part of the question.
Outdoor furniture, how it holds.
So most of my outdoor furniture is all vintage. It's old salt Torini furniture that I bought at auction and from dealers. Some of it came from Joel Chen in LA, and I had it all powder coated, which helps the duration of it. But some of the things are too heavy and we can't move them inside, like some of the benches, we just don't when we leave them out there. But I think it vastly improves the length of the life of the paint surface if you have a space to store it, or if you don't have a space to store it, just cover it with something and leave it that way through over the winter. I like my outdoor spaces to just be like the terrace to have like nothing on it in the winter, you know. But it does revolve around a lot of schlepping from that barn that you see, of moving things out and putting them in place. But yeah.
And we're going to end on two questions. You know, your garden is sort of your laboratory. Is there anything that you're experimenting with differently this summer with your plantings? And if you could choose only one bloom for a vase to display in your home, what would it be and why?
One bloom in a vase, so like one type of flower?
Yeah, like, and what kind of like vessel would you put it in?
Oh, what type of vessel that I would put it in? Well, so selfishly, I would put it in one of my catch pots. I would one of my faux ball ones, because you know you can put arrangements of peonies in there. You can put an orchid in there. You can put a myrtle topiary in there. You can put your kitchen tools in there. There's a myriad of sources of things that I would do, and we're constantly experimenting. Like we just brought in a golden delicious apple tree, and I'm not such a big fan of golden delicious apples, but I've learned that they are the universal sort of pollinator. So we're going to find a spot and we're going to plant this. And there's always like, I listen to my fellow gardeners about tricks like that dahlia tube that I mentioned earlier. I'm constantly doing stuff like that. Like this year, along the lines with planting my dahlia tubers in early, I usually start my cannas inside and then plant them outside when we pass the last frost date. This year, I dug holes and I put the canna roots right in the ground about April 15th, and they're coming up and they're coming up great. They may be a little bit slower to start, but I'm always experimenting with color. You know, things may not work in one place. Like I had a dickens of a time getting lily of the valley to grow it in my house, and I planted it in the front of the house, I planted it in the back of the house, and I don't give up. I just keep going. And one of my gardeners recommended digging up lily of the valley from neighbors, and they have it growing like weeds. And so I went over and filled up the back of my car from a neighbor's house, and all along the rows of Sharon hedge around my carport this year is all lily of the valley that's just going to come up in masses, and finally I'll have big handfuls of it for the literally 10 days that it's in bloom for. But I will cherish each of those days and thankful that I have it. But my lesson in that is don't give up, just keep trying, figure out a way that it'll work, because plants, or if they're not happy in one place, dig them up, move them into another, give them some more shade. Maybe they need some more fertilizer, read about them, ask your friends. There's going to be a solution for it.
And last but not least, someone who was asking where to buy your lamps in Maine, but I guess it really applies to anyone in New England. Is ChristopherSpitzmiller.com the best place to go to see all of the stockists?
Yes, you can see all of our stockists. There's a woman in Seal Harbor that hasn't committed to doing an order, but up in Maine, we're going to have hopefully a place up there. And then in the Boston Design Center, Eric Heidel is my main outlet there. So those are the two places that I recommend up that way.
And then for your plates and other accessories, they're on the website.
Yeah, they're on the website, and we have more than ever is like explained on the website, and we keep big vases amounts in the upstairs of the Grange Hall. The only color that's always gone is blue and white. We never, no matter how much blue and white we make, it's just gone, you know.
And finally, I want to end it, you know, obviously your farm is a private residence, but you've been very generous over the years, opening it to the public certain times of the year through garden conservancy tours or other events. Is there anything on the horizon this year, or should we?
Yes, we're going to do some open day in June, and just keep your eye out there, because I haven't quite picked when it's going to be yet. The Garden Conservancy Day is scheduled for September, and that's on the books, but I want to have sort of a day around the first week in June, exactly when the peonies are all going to be blooming. And, we'll have some pottery out, because the nice thing is the building that you see far to the other side of the house is the old Grange Hall, which is where we make all of the dishes, and a lot of the accessory pieces are made right up there at the farm. We had sort of a flash sale in Columbus Day weekend, and I thought we would have sort of like 20 to 30 visitors, and we had like 250 or 300 people come that day, and there were big lines and stuff. So we'll figure out a way that we can time it so that there'll be a little bit of a staggered way to get people in there. But we can have 100 people walking around there in any given hour, and you can see there's enough space that people aren't on top of each other. And Stephen Stills at dinner last night announced that officially COVID is over. So, I think especially for outside things like visiting gardens, we need this. I was literally crestfallen last year being a new board member and having the open days program canceled. And I'm glad very much that this year it's going to be back in effect, and that it will be a part of people's lives, because we need gardens more than ever right now. And they are a great healer and a great way to spend your time and take in a weekend.
Well, we will follow you on Instagram at Christopher Spitzmiller to be on the lookout for that June date, hopefully.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and look forward to meeting you all in person if you can make the trek down there. It's a pleasure.
Well, Christopher, on behalf of everyone at New England Home, thank you so much for doing this today. It's been a real treat, and I'm always inspired when I get to visit Clove Brook Farm and also just see pictures of it. So I hope people will go out and buy the beautiful new book.
Thank you. That was my whole goal, was to inspire. It's not to look at me. It's to like plant some dahlias, entertain, do some of the things that I get joy out of, and I think that you will get joy out of, because I think some of those things have gotten lost in life, and we need to relish those, because at the end of the day, it's the friendships that we have in our lives and the flowers that we're growing in our garden that I think our lives are going to be judged on, more than the economic success that any of us have had.
Absolutely, well said. Also, big thanks to Boston Design Week. Thank you so much for having us today, and to everyone who tuned in this afternoon. We really appreciate it, and I hope you walked away inspired and entertained, and maybe eager to go get your hands dirty in the garden. So we hope you have a good afternoon, and thank you again.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.